So we've got our ortho width is not what we want. We want our wanted camera position dot y and our wanted camera position dot z. No, wrong. Want this. Especially if you calculate in radians. Well, I mean, that's just simple, right? You know, radian is just a unit of measurement. And yeah, it can get annoying. Yeah, angles and stuff, though, usually are... You do a lot of... It's interesting, with computers and the rest, you don't actually do what would be considered, quote, advanced math a lot of the time. Like... Yeah, a lot of game engines, like Unreal's working in degrees, it's not working in radians. A lot of the math that you'll see in games, you know, would classically not be like advanced math, like your super advanced math or whatever would, you know, in college would be like calculus and stuff like that. But that is absolutely not what is used in computer science. It's more, you know, you don't go do calculus when you're doing programming. You're doing linear algebra. So, you know, your matrix transforms, angles, it's all about basically geometry. And it's interesting that kind of more of that like geometry sort of stuff isn't really taught as far as like when I was going through school. It was more, you know, you get in your advanced classes and it's all calculus and blah blah blah, calculating the area under curves. So when I get to college and I'm like, shit, I haven't done linear algebra in like 2 years, you know, and everything is linear algebra. And then you discover that there's so much more to linear algebra and stuff like that than you ever thought possible. Like, I think our final in graphics class was we had to derive the perspective matrix transform from scratch, and that was like the one question on the test, which is basically you take the perspective matrix is a matrix that will take the 3D world and smash it onto a two-dimensional plane properly. So something that can basically take, you know, your nice camera plane, project, you know, this whole world into it. This is a really awful drawing, but so you basically like take a, you know, if there's a little box here, it's going to take that box and map it to a box on the screen properly in 3 dimensions and all that. And it'll take into account like the angle of the frustum and all that sort of stuff properly, and take into account all the things. And then, you know, you're basically got this big, you know, podium looking object. You can tilt your head. Everything inside of this area gets actually drawn to the screen. And you got to do stuff like hyperbolic texture coordinates and all sorts of crazy shit to get all your stuff working properly. That was one of those classes that was one of the fail classes that, like, there are classes in college that are just meant to fail students, and that was one of them. There was another one which was absolutely ridiculously annoying, which was taught by this guy who used to work at NASA. Redo probability calculus. Yeah, this one guy who used to work at NASA, so his whole course was about mathematically proving your code. So you'd have like a nice piece of code and you'd have to write down a mathematical proof that the code did exactly what it was supposed to do, which is the most tedious, mind-numbing, absolutely garbage skill. Like, it's just useless unless you're landing a space shuttle. In which case it makes sense. Like, if you're writing the code to lower the landing gear, it's kind of worth it to take another look at your code and be like, hey buddy, why don't you come over here and take a look at this? Why don't we just like make sure we don't kill like hundreds of people? So let's take another half hour and not just slam this out and then go to lunch. Let's this could be your kid or your mom or your dad on a flight trying to land. That landing gear better come down. Oh, whoops, if the velocity of the space shuttle is, greater than a certain value, the landing gear doesn't open because, the sensor thinks it's messed up. It's kind of like in some games, you can drive backwards at infinite velocity because it's just like, if velocity is greater than X, then don't worry about it. Alright, so we also need to cap our speed, which is something also that I just realized by yakking away. Alright, so that should be our camera positions, probably. Alright. Genetics, so like super advanced genetics or like basic genetics, breeding fruit flies and seeing which ones have wings, God, I can draw letters, can't I? There you go, genetics. We're finished. The whole shebang with epigenetics, yeah. This guy has blonde hair. This one has brown hair. This one, if your mom has brown hair, that means that you have a, 2/3 chance of carrying a recessive gene for blonde hair, and that just because a gene is dominant doesn't mean it just leaves the gene pool. That whole crap. That was always the funniest thing. Like, people would say, oh, like this gene is dominant, so it's going to get bred out of the population. And science teacher would just like shake his head and be like, that's absolutely not true. He'd be like, no, actually, if a recessive gene is more desirable, it's actually easier for the population to swing towards it because it's recessive. You can much more easily, those individuals actually get a much larger expression of that gene. Alright, so determine camera width. Our camera width should, we're going to be basically determining our wanted camera width and our current camera width. So it basically should be determined. How are we determining our camera width? It's our velocity ratio, and we have a min and a max. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would mean you understand selective pressure. And then people are arguing about, like, what's an adaptation versus evolution. Like, adaptation is an animal that learns or can learn to, like, dig in the ground and sleep during the winter. And then evolution would be, I have thicker fur, therefore I did not die this winter. And then there's like, there's the blacksmith who gets bigger muscles because he's pounding away on a piece of metal all day. And then he's got kids that have bigger muscles. And you're like, well, how the hell does that happen? And then you go to like methyl groups in genes and all that sort of crap, where it's not literally just what genes you have, but there is actually a reconstruction of your DNA during your life. And there are different things that can actually cause expression of those genes to change. So genetics and all that crap is super complicated, which is why Gregor Mendel had to, screw around with all of his data when he was breeding flowers to make it all seem exactly as he wanted it to look like. But only in reproductive streams. Yeah, exactly. I think there was one thing where I was trying to get across to people like how small a difference a selective pressure could make. Like you might think on some scales like, oh, there's a mountain range in between these two species of mice. And I'd be like, yeah, there could be a sidewalk between two species of grass, and that is enough to cause diversity. Like the bugs on one side of the sidewalk can't make it across the sidewalk, therefore you could have a difference that arises. People think too big. It's all about the small things. So let's get back to actually... So we've got our current ortho width, our wanted ortho width. We are actually saying like... determine our camera width. So... yeah, so we should do another like if-im followed after. Equals null pointer, then our wanted ortho, our wanted width, our wanted camera width should be our default width equals this default width. Camera data does not equal null pointer, then default width equals camera data min ortho width. Alright, else. Yeah. So I found genetics kind of fun, not too crazy complicated. Though that probably also has a lot to do with we had a really, really good science teacher in high school, where I went. Like he was probably, I think he was rated as one of the top science teachers in the state, and he was just excellent at explaining concepts. So he was teaching like biology and chemistry and all that sort of crap, and he was one of the only guys where you still had to like actually dissect, like pigs and stuff like that in high school. He was so old school. He's like, no, you need to learn this. We're not going. He wouldn't use the textbook pretty much. He wouldn't use the new textbook. He would use the old textbook that just was a data sheet basically of all the things. He's like, no, just learn it. I don't care about any of this. No, his story about becoming a teacher though is really funny. Like he really liked biology and all that sort of stuff, but then he like made a switch to being a professor because he was just counting. He was counting hairs on like a bug's butt for like an entire week, and then he just quit. He was just like, no, this isn't for me. I can't do this anymore. So we're gonna need to get our velocity, our current follow velocity. So we're basically gonna say our current follow velocity and we need to get the size of it. So current. So we need to get the size float velocity mag equals this, and we're going to say our wanted camera width should equal the default width plus the and we should be adding camera data, the ortho width velocity ratio multiplied by velocity mag. Alright, and we should be saying set it right here. Never had a good teacher. I'm a chemistry fan. Yeah, I remember. I didn't actually take chemistry. I blew things up. That was my chemistry class, was my garage. I actually went and took like the college equivalency exam for chemistry when I hadn't taken the class, and like the teacher was super pissed. He's like, "You can't just go take that test. You're not gonna pass it." You know, they were more like, "We don't want somebody who's gonna just fail the test. Take the test." So I went and took the test anyway, and I passed the test better than most of the people in his class. That was probably the funniest damn thing ever. Alright, so again, floated. We need the ortho width. So we're gonna basically go from the current width to the wanted width based on the speed. So float speed, we're gonna say it's 100.0 f. So if our M camera say speed equals M camera data ortho width velocity ratio. Yeah, I remember having to derive, like, just, like, figure out how the hell combustion works during the test. I was like, fuck, what the hell? Like, okay, we need, I know the inputs and outputs, now how the hell does this thing work? You know, I know this generates water and CO2. So what has to happen here? Do the math. Crap. Alright, so our camera, if our camera is not camera data is not null. We're going to set our default camera width here. We're going to multiply by there. So we need to set our camera width offset. Our camera width offset needs to be based on our zoom. So we're going to need to figure out how much we are moving our camera to offset our zoom, which is going to be, so when we make something bigger and we scale it from the bottom right, it's going to go out like this. So the center actually moves over to here, and we have to compute this vector so that we move our thing over so we're still centered at the point there. So basically what that is going to look like is I mean, do we want to just like assume that this is our position, so we should always be moving, our offset should be our zoom divided by 2, right? Like we should always be moving basically half of our height and half of our width to the bottom left. So we're going to need our aspect ratio, and we're going to need half our window size basically. And our ortho width is going to be that value. But we need to get our window size in order to get our aspect ratio. So we're going to have our float x offset. This is actually going to be our y offset and our z offset. And our y offset is going to equal the... We're going to actually do this after we work. I never got into advanced chemistry though, because, you know, I went into programming school, and chemistry doesn't matter in programming school. So the y offset is the x, so that's going to be the current camera width multiplied by -0.5, and the z offset is going to be like, so it's going to be 4 by 3 or whatever. So our aspect ratio would be 4 width and 3 height. So we should be dividing by aspect, so it should be z offset should be such. So we just do f. Our current camera width offset should be 0 y offset z offset, like so. So that should determine our camera width and our offset based on our zoom. And we'll see if that's actually correct. It may be that this camera width offset needs to take into account some other value. So camera direction offset. Our direction should be the facing direction of the object, and that's going to be determined by its transform, the yaw or whatever of the actual object. So our direction offset, if there is no followed actor, should be 0. It's going to be wanted camera direction offset equals 0 vector. Otherwise, if m followed actor equals null pointer or m camera data, equals null pointer, then that's what we want to set. So the direction offset, basically we need to know if they're facing right or left. So I think our movement object has some of that. So it's just like get actor transform, get rotation, and then we're gonna compare the F rotator. So that is the yaw of the object. So we need to check if the yaw is positive or negative, basically. And that is the so if the yaw is less than 0, then offset direction is negative 1.0. So it's going to be use camera direction offset percent. So we want to calculate this based on the current camera width. So float offset distance is actually going to be the current camera width multiplied by the offset direction. And we're going to have wanted camera direction offset is going to be, we're going to set the Y, it looks like, to offset distance. So we're not going to be doing much else. So Y speed, Z speed. We don't have a direction speed, do we? We need a direction speed to actually set camera direction offset speed. And we're going to continue using kind of our box geometry for our speed offset capping. So we say wanted camera position is going to be, yeah, the Y speed and Z speed are actually the exact same. So we're just saying wanted camera position offset dot Y is equal to our lerp. Now, yeah, we actually do need a speed. We're going to set the speed to 100. Camera data, camera direction offset speed. So it's going to be direction offset dot Y. This is going to be current camera direction offset dot Y. And we'll do the same for the Z. looks better. Let's make sure we're actually doing that current camera width proper. Yeah, that looks right. And we're not lerping this camera offset because that needs to always be the same. The same proper value, that is. Okay, so now we need to determine the camera lead. So we actually don't care if the followed actor is null pointer, we just care if the camera data is null. So we need the lead speed, lead min and max. Speed, lead min, lead max. Yeah, just lead speed. And we're gonna set that to 3000. Alright. So our camera data, if our camera data is null, then our wanted camera lead offset is going to equal f vector. Well, it's not going to equal anything, is it? Like, we basically want to let our velocity history speed that up, so it's be like the wanted camera lead offset is actually going to equal the current follow velocity multiplied by the lead distance. Yeah, it'll be like float lead velocity ratio, and we'll set that to 0. We just have the current camera lead offset. It's just going to be these guys, isn't it? Current velocity times it. Well, we want the... That's not exactly right, is it? It's the lead offset should be the current velocity times the lead ratio. We should have a distance. Its current velocity, current follow velocity should be normalized multiplied by the lead velocity ratio multiplied by the lead distance. No, it should just be current velocity multiplied by lead distance. So this should be lead distance. So we're discovering the lead distance inside of here. So basically, we're going to... We need the normalized velocity. Alright, so f vector normalized velocity, and that's going to be... Yeah, so it's going to be like that. So we're going to have the magnitude. Well, this has the camera lead based on the actual speed of the object, and the Y and Z. Alright, yeah, here we go. We also want, like, bool vertical lead equals true by default, I guess. And, So we'll do like if vertical lead, otherwise it's this, otherwise it's just wanted is equal to f vector 0 vector, and we want to set the wanted lead offset dot y equal to the lead distance. And we need a direction. I mean, I guess we can multiply by the sine of the y value. I guess it doesn't matter if it's 0. Alright, so we're going to set the magnitude of our velocity is normally going to be let's just say it's going to equal to y. So if we're jumping, if we're like going into the air, that's another thing to think about. We probably just want to use the y. Well, it depends, right? If we're running at like 100 meters per second and then we jump, our velocity is going to continue to be in the y, but now we've jumped, we're going to move faster. So if you were jumping, the camera would lead more. If we were using the magnitude of the velocity vector, we want to keep it to the y if the allow vertical lead. So it's basically if not camera data. Yeah, why don't we just do camera data is that vertical lead equals camera data allow vertical lead. So if vertical lead, then the magnitude is going to be actually the size of this guy, otherwise not. And basically what we're doing is we're saying lead distance equals camera data camera lead min plus the camera lead velocity ratio. It's going to be magnitude times camera lead velocity ratio. And then if lead distance is greater than the maximum, then lead distance equals max. And that should set up our leads for us. Our camera lead minimum. Yeah, again, this is in screen space, so we need to multiply this camera lead velocity ratio by, so float camera velocity ratio. We're going to set this guy, but we need to multiply it by the ortho width. That's what it looks like. And it should be current camera width. Yeah. So float, min, and max. Min is gonna also be the camera min. So it's gonna look like this. They're dealing with screen units. And this is also wrong here. The ortho width velocity ratio is 0.7. Does this need to be in terms of the screen size? Or just a constant speed? I think it should be a constant speed. The one at ortho width should change, not based on the size of the ortho width, but based on just reality. So we'll change that. Direction offset percent. Well, the camera lead is also wrong. Alright, well let's just, zoom looks okay. The ortho width and all that. Camera lead is there. Wait a minute. This is the old code, isn't it? So determine camera lead is based on, is based on this guy, and then it goes direction offset, width, and position. So that's the last function that we're working on. So what we need to do is double check a couple things. So the camera direction offset, right now we are taking the yaw and then gives us our offset direction, so it's going to be what the hell are we doing right here? Like, we set camera width, our offset is literally the width of the camera multiplied by the direction. That's just the whole damn camera. That's not what we want. we should actually be calculating things differently. We should be saying this camera data offset direction percent multiplied by the offset direction and current camera width. And we need, to get the height, we need the window and the aspect ratio. So the y should be the camera data direction offset percent multiplied by this. The offset direction is correct in there. And then the z needs to be with, let's just do window, camera width, camera height. Camera width is just going to be our current camera width. And our camera height is going to be current camera width divided by aspect. So our z is actually going to be like this. So that should get that working for us. That was the other issue. We've got camera width. And again, should the camera offset be based on screen size, or should it be based off of just an absolute value? Well, we want it to be consistent if we zoom in and out. So we actually need this to be, again, in screen space as opposed to something else. So we need camera offset should be a percent. Alright, so if this doesn't equal that, we need to actually find the window width. So it's going to be float, camera width, camera height, camera width equals and current camera width, camera height equals camera width divided by aspect. offset multiplied by camera width, and then camera offset dot y, z times camera height. Now I need to take a look at this velocity. I've got this camera lead velocity ratio, and the velocity is in screen space, so that's fine. It's a distance. It should be in screen space. Alright, and basically what we're doing here, so our current camera position, our final camera position should equal our M current camera position. And then basically what we want to go through is if we use the, so if M camera, I just have a couple bools here. The bool like dynamic zoom, offset direction, lead, and basically what we do is we just add them together. So dynamic zoom, we're just going to set them all to true by default. Otherwise we just do like if M camera data does not equal null pointer, and then dynamic zoom equals camera data. Use dynamic camera zoom, offset direction equals M camera data. Use direction offset, and lead equals camera data. Use camera lead. And we just do ifs. So if dynamic zoom, then we're basically going to say the final camera position plus equals current camera width offset. If it should actually go in order of our things here. So if actually, yeah, dynamic zoom is first. So dynamic zoom, if offset direction. I just like to keep things the same order in code as they are in other places, just so your eyes always know where to find things. So offset direction is going to be direction offset. So this is going to be if we're leading, then the camera position plus equals the lead offset. So we've got the width offset, the lead offset, the direction offset, so that's going to be our final position. Now the question is, should we have a global camera move? Because if we toggled on or off one of these things, so when we snap our camera somewhere else, so probably we need, like, this is just going to be this like F vector final wanted camera position. And why don't we just save it so it's like final wanted camera position. So, and then we're gonna do our lerp for each one of these things. And we should have a global camera speed, which is basically a gigantic maximum for this thing, because it should always be moving at maximum speed, because everything else has like all these internal speeds all built in. This should be like, you know, everything else barred. You know, if we get like a our wanted position is supposed to be all the way across the map or some craziness, you know, and we've switched cameras, whatever. So like our speed should be like something just astronomical. So we should set speed to be then camera data, global camera speed. Alright, so we have a global camera speed, and that should be the final position. So update camera position should and we have current ortho width, the X, and all that stuff. Looking at this wanted position,